Here we are again for another edition of East West this month, where a lot of things are going on. I'm Philip Shaw from Dresden, Ontario, and I'm here with Dr. Enamul Haque from Dhaka, Bangladesh. And this month we're going to we talked a bit about the Iranian war last time around, and that is continuing as we speak. There's a blockade. The Americans have a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and I suppose the Iranians do, and they have the same type of thing going on. We still have somewhat of a ceasefire, but it seems to be coming to its end. It's hard to know what's happening exactly with the war in the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and the United States. But what is interesting now as we go into about May 13th, that we finally have this meeting between the American president and the Chinese president in Beijing that's actually taking place today. And I've often wondered how that's going to work, especially when a war is going on from an American perspective. Because as we all know, as you all know, East-West viewers, is that the war in Iran and Strait of Hormuz and between the United States and Iran and Israel and Lebanon has caused widespread inflationary shocks to the global economy with the price of fertilizer and fuel and different things like that. And so along comes this meeting, which was postponed once between the president of the United States and the president of China. And now we've got Mr. Trump on the ground in China, ready for this meeting with China. And I'm just wondering how that's all going to work out. At first glance, you think about all the Iranian oil that's being bought by China. And of course, that's been cut off from all these blockades. So wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall in some of those rooms where the negotiations are going on and the Chinese have been buying Iranian oil? Of course, the Americans don't want any of that. At the same time, the Americans are bringing along a whole entourage of business elites. I'll let Dr. Haque describe who is in that and how that's going to work. And I've always thought that this would be a problem. It's one thing for the Americans to get together with the Chinese and discuss business. It's another thing to do it in a global environment now where there's a war going on by one of the active participants of this meeting today. So I'm going to throw it over to Dr. Haque to take it from there. And how does China adjust to all this? And will they continue to buy Iranian oil, or is there going to be some other means? But what's going to come out of this meeting that we're seeing taking place today? And I'll throw it back to you, Enamul.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. I was looking at the entourage who are going with the President Trump, and very interestingly, the finance secretary, the finance minister, the defense minister, and the foreign ministers are there. In addition, he has with him all the giants of the tech giants, from Elon Musk all the way to NVIDIA chief, the Apple CEO, and many others, and plus Citigroup also. So when you look into it, I can see that one of his target is definitely the electronic industry, basically getting the Apple back into China. Remember, the first time he was in power, it was Huawei who was in trouble. And now this time, technically in China, Apple is in trouble because Apple has been dislodged from the top seller by the Huawei. So that's why that one. Elon Musk is also in trouble with BYD. If you remember, the BYD is the Chinese car company, which is selling everywhere in the world. Even in Dhaka, we have BYD sales agent. So BYD is at least changing the whole, the market of the electric vehicles. So that is something that is interesting. So Elon Musk is there. So given this, I think his primary target is the electronic industry. That's my feeling. He has with him the defense secretary. Probably that is more to deal with the Taiwan issue. Probably that is where he has a deal, $12 billion new arms sales to Taiwan. So that's probably one of the negotiating issue with the Xi. What you have mentioned, the Chinese are buying quite a lot of oil from Iran. That is something used to travel through the sea route with what they call the black ships, the ships that are without the country of origin, the transfer product from one to the other. And used to be Malacca Channel was one of the area where they used to do the transfer. So I think with the blockade going on, the Americans are trying to make sure that Iran cannot get through this. That's probably one of the strategy. But my own feeling is that Chinese have alternative routes. Route number one is from China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all the way to Beijing. So they have the route already, train route, which is the old Silk Route. So that route is active now, which is going to be interesting one. And second is obviously the new route that is coming, not yet started, which is through the Myanmar all the way to Kunming. So that's a second train route is coming up. So I think given these particular changes, these are the point of discussion whether he can block it. My own feeling is that it will be very difficult for Chinese to actually agree on this idea that they will not buy oil. They will officially never say that because it's economically much beneficial for them. It actually brings them into, they are more competitive than others. So that's something. Now, also we have to remember this is a big economy. They need fuel. So any fuel crisis within China will also be a political trouble. So they will not be ready to accept that. Having said that, the other point I think is also going to be negotiated, my hunch, but I'm not sure that I have seen. I didn't see Agriculture Secretary there in their team, which is the issue of the soybean and other agriculture products purchase, because that is something also that Trump may be interested in it. This market, you all know, that is already taken over by Brazilians mostly. I'm not sure whether Canada has started it because I know that Canadian Prime Minister was in Beijing a few months ago. So that was something that Canadian Prime Minister was interested. So maybe you can tell us what has happened with the Canada-Chinese deal. Is there anything new there for Trump to think
Well,
about?
yeah, if you think about it, like a large part of what you mentioned it is a large part of what the Americans want is some type of an agreement with regard to agricultural commodities, with hopefully the Chinese buying a lot of American soybeans, and not only soybeans right now, but future purchases in future years.
Mhm.
However, as the agricultural global economy has developed, Brazil now they're the biggest producer of both corn and soybeans in the world now. And China has a voracious appetite for soybeans. Every day they sit down and have some soy product of some type, and they buy about 100 million metric tons of soybeans a year. That's a lot of soybeans. Canada, with all the soybeans we produce, could keep that market satisfied for maybe 7 days. That's how big it is.
Okay.
And the Canadian initiative into China had mostly to do with canola seed and canola oil, which we export into China, and the Chinese cut us off over Meng Wanzhou and the jailing of the jailing of Meng Wanzhou, who's the Hyundai. Uh,
Huawei chief? I think Huawei
yeah,
funded. Yeah, yeah,
Huawei chief.
Huawei chief. Yeah.
Not Hyundai. I'm sorry,
Mm.
Huawei chief a few years ago. But anyway, we have that market down back for canola seed and canola oil now into China. But the big get for the American president, and he does have a political constituency in the United States looking for success on this, is to get the Chinese actively buying U.S. soybeans again. That's a tall order because Brazilian soybeans are cheaper. However, their protein content isn't as high as American soybeans. And yes, we do sell Canadian soybeans as well, but we just are too small a player for
Not bad.
anything to come along like that. So I think that's something that Trump would want for his own political constituency. When I think about high tech like Apple, and you mentioned it, NVIDIA and others, when I go to Asia, when I go to Bangladesh, for instance, and I see all these Chinese smartphones and all these Chinese electronics, it's kind of a double-edged sword what they're going to get from that, because they're competition for those firms as well, right?
Yeah,
And
I
and
think
so go ahead.
Yeah, I think what is happening, particularly after the Huawei, there has been a lot of restriction in the name of security issues, and the Apple is barred from selling certain. Same with Elon Musk. So I think that is the point they are going to mitigate. At least they have to. It has to be reciprocal. You remember also the TikTok issue. That is also another issue with the Chinese. So these are the major issues. On the other hand, my own feeling is that China is also trying to get a, tariff is another major issue because there is a strong anti-trade barriers, and that is China is suffering from it. But there is one more thing that is interesting, which is the trade. Chinese trade is now what they call China plus one mode, which means many of the Chinese products are now sold not out of China, but of many other countries. So they have been stations outside China to the Vietnam, to Thailand, to Malaysia, to Bangladesh, all to Sri Lanka. All these places are now investment is coming. So Chinese are also going through that particular mode of transfer, which means the product is probably some percent is Chinese, but others are manufactured within Bangladesh. So we have now, for example, I was looking at the data, very interesting data, which is this time Bangladesh has become the second largest exporter of RMG, ready-made garments products, out of two United States. Close to 3 billion. We used to have 2 billion. Now it is close to 3 billion. And it is actually bigger than Chinese export to United States, partly telling you that China is divesting out of RMG factories, or they have, and Vietnam is the number one. So if you look into the export of Vietnam is the number one, almost less than half of it is Bangladesh, and then it's less than Bangladesh is Chinese. So you can see that trade modalities are changing. And probably that will be another way of discussing the American economy. I think both American economy needs how to reduce inflation, because that's also supply chain issue. So that's another discussion that I can see coming. My own feeling is that Iran war will also appear in that discussion. But my feeling, particularly sitting here in Bangladesh, is that there will be not much progress. In particular, I'm assuming that right now Chinese are the chairman of the president of the Security Council, so they will probably stay neutral rather than being sided by one party as a party to other. So my own feeling is that they will remain neutral more or less and try to make sure that if they can negotiate some deal with the Iranians and the Americans, if that is possible. But they will probably not be a negotiator. That's my feeling.
That's interesting. That's interesting because, from the perspective over here is that if you're trading with the Iranians, you're bad people. And, I know the view from Asia is completely different. And so maybe they will take a more neutral view. But however, we're talking about one of the two biggest economies in the world, right? You're an economist, right? So, I mean, so tariffs mean a big deal on both sides, right?
On both
And
sides.
so it might be interesting in another month to look back on what has happened, because President Trump gets a lot of criticism for his style, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this, simply because of the economics involved and the size of the economies, and they're scheduling another meeting for later this year in Washington. And so as we go ahead, hopefully there'll be some good things out of it. But like I say, economic good things. But as I say, or as you mentioned, it's likely more neutral about Iran. That's not the view that maybe most people share from here, but that's an interesting thing to look at. But we'll be finding out in the next few days what actually happens between the United States and China.
Yes, I think this is something. My feeling is still that there will not much progress on Iran issue, because I think it's a totally different issue right now, because the negotiation has stalled. There are at least fear there will be more war coming, and that will probably devastate the global economy more with the supply chain disruption. So I think the Chinese trip would be more of a trying to find out a better solution between the trade dispute between Americans and Chinese economy. My own other feeling is that even if it is not open, but Taiwan issue will come between China and American discussion. And China will probably tell to not sell all the arms to the Taiwanese. Probably that will be their way, but I'm not sure whether Trump would agree or not.
Hard to say. You probably saw the Taiwanese opposition leader went to China last month, and
Exactly.
she was well received. At least it seemed like it was. It's hard to tell, though, from a Western perspective, how that all how with all the Chinese spoken and all the body language, how that really went. But yes, that's always an issue between the United States and China, and certainly will be this time around too.
Lastly, because my own feeling is that also with the Iran war, you have seen the technology between Chinese and American. And with so much problem with the American, particularly the casualty and defeat they have at least they have taken, which is right from the F-35. Remember all this radar. If I look into all these, there may be not enough appetite even within Taiwanese to depend on that technology. I think that's a very interesting outcome of the war, which probably will not affect their discussion, but a lot of issues are coming up. So I think that is how I see things.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable to me, but it'll be incredibly interesting to see how it all works out, simply because these are two of the most powerful countries in the world with two of the largest economies. So we'll see how it happens. So thank you very much, Enamel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.